Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, I can take some questions from the media. Who do we have here? Goodness me, it's a whole host of media. Gary.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you. Channel 4 News. This morning, Cressida Dick said that in the light of the attack over the weekend, absolutely we need to look at having more police, more forensics, more intelligence officers. Do you agree, and would that mean you were wrong to cut numbers?
Well, Cressida Dick has said that the Metropolitan Police are well-resourced, and they are. She said they have very powerful counter-terrorism capabilities, and they do. We have protected counter-terrorism policing budgets. We've funded an uplift in the number of armed police officers. And from 2015, as I said in my speech, we're protecting police budgets. And that is despite the fact that Jeremy Corbyn's front bench suggested that police budgets should be cut by up to 10%. But it's also about the powers that you give to the police. And I've been responsible for giving the police extra powers to deal with terrorism. Jeremy Corbyn has boasted that he has opposed those powers and opposed the powers for anti-terror actions throughout his time in Parliament. And I also support absolutely shoot to kill. And I think what we saw on our streets on Saturday was how important that was. Those police officers, within 8 minutes, had shot the 3 attackers and killed them, and that saved countless lives. And the next question. Beth.
Thank you, Prime Minister. A question on those police cuts. You talked today about stamping out extremism in communities and preventing young people becoming radicalised. But isn't it a fact that 20,000 police cuts has meant that there have been cuts to neighbourhood policing, cuts to community policing, cuts in exactly the place where you need to stop this ideology growing? Was this raised while you were Home Secretary as a problem, and what are you going to do about it? Thank you.
Well, it is absolutely right. I've set out in my speech today that I do think we need to take a much more robust approach to dealing with extremism in this country. I think there has overall, we've made progress on this. I introduced a counter-extremism strategy when I was Home Secretary, but I think we have seen overall too much tolerance of extremism in our society. So we do need to deal with it. That's why in our manifesto we've set out a step that I think we'll be the first country in the world to take, which is to introduce the Commission on Countering Extremism. That will be working with the public sector, but also with civil society, with organisations and individuals, both to promote our pluralistic British values, but also to help people identifying extremism and be able to know how to deal with that extremism when they see it. That's the first time any country has taken that step. I believe that's important, and I believe that will help us in that necessary task of stamping out extremism. Andy.
Thank you very much. Andy Bell, 5 News. Prime Minister, you accused those who were concerned about police cuts of crying wolf. Do you accept now that you were wrong to say that they were raising legitimate concerns? And do you commit to restore those 20,000 police officers that were cut since 2010?
I have answered the question about policing, but I'm very happy to repeat what we have been doing in policing, which is we have been protecting counter-terrorism policing. We've provided funding for an uplift in armed policing. We have, from 2015, we're protecting police budgets. As I said, the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn's front bench, said that police budgets could be cut by up to 10%. We said, no, we're going to protect those budgets. But it's also about the powers that you give to the police. And I have been responsible through a number of pieces of legislation I've introduced to give extra powers to the police to deal with terrorism. Jeremy Corbyn's boasted that he's opposed every single piece of anti-terror legislation since he came into Parliament. And Laura.
Prime Minister, the most direct experience that members of the public see in terms of efforts of a government to keep us safe is the number of police on the streets. On your watch as Home Secretary, the number of armed police officers fell. It's still lower than it was in 2010. The number of officers fell in total by 20,000, as we've been hearing. And also control orders that monitored terrorists were watered down. Now, if you mean what you say this morning, that this election should be about leadership and it's your #1 priority to keep the public safe, would it not be leadership to say that you would reverse those cuts?
You mentioned the control orders there, Laura. Of course, the control orders were being knocked down in the courts. And that's why we had to look at the issue of control orders, but ensured that the police and the security services had powers in their remit to be able to deal with people who would do us harm. And that's what we've done. We have enhanced the powers for the police. We've ensured that the security and intelligence agencies have the powers that they need through the Investigatory Powers Act that I introduced when I was Home Secretary. And that's what this is about. It's ensuring that our police and security services are able to do the job that we want them to do. We've protected those counter-terrorism policing budgets. As I say, we are funding an uplift of, I think it's 1,500 armed police officers. But it's not just about resource, it's about the powers people have. And as I said earlier on in response to a question, I fully support the police in Shoot to Kill, and we saw on Saturday night how important it was for them to be able to act on our streets to protect British citizens. Nick?
Thank you, Prime Minister. You've said that the time has come to tackle not just violent extremism, but extremist ideology. Does that mean that you've changed your mind? Because you'll remember that you had a very public row with Michael Gove in 2014 when he said that you and your officials were prepared to tackle violent extremism but not extremist ideology. So are you now agreeing with what Michael Gove said then, which is that you need to drain the swamp and not simply beat back the crocodiles from the boat?
Well, I've been very, very clear throughout, actually, that it wasn't just about violent extremism, it was about extremism. And that's why, when I was Home Secretary, we introduced the counter-extremism strategy. You can look back, I've made various speeches over the years where I have said that we do need to deal with extremism, not just the violent extremism. But what we've now seen is a change in the threat that we face, an increased diversity in the threat that we face. And I think it is important for us to respond to that, and that's what you would expect a government to do. And as I said, while we've made progress in relation to extremism, I believe that there has overall been too great a willingness to tolerate extremism in our society, and that's why we need to take further action. Yes, Chris.
Chris Hope, Telegraph. Prime Minister, I know you blame the courts for getting rid of control orders in 2011 when you were Home Secretary, but why not bring them back? And do you regret getting rid of them so soon?
No, as I say, the control orders were being increasingly knocked down by the courts. We introduced the terrorism prevention and investigation measures. We enhanced those measures most recently to ensure that the police and security services have the powers they need. We've also given the police additional powers in a variety of ways. For example, the ability to take somebody's passport away temporarily at the border, to then, if they think they're leaving the country to perhaps to go to fight in Syria, for example, and to see if they can prosecute that individual. We have consistently looked at ensuring that people have the powers they need. We need to do that. We need to continue to do that as we see a different threat, and that's what I'm committed to do. Ben.
Talked about protecting the counter-terrorism policing budgets, but what about the neighbourhood policing budgets? You oversaw huge cuts to that. Those are the officers on the ground, the eyes and ears who generate intelligence. Was it a mistake to cut thousands of those? We
are protecting police budgets. As I say, what we saw in 2015 was the Labour Party front bench under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership saying that they would be happy to see police cuts, that they thought it was possible to have police cuts of 5 to 10%. We said no, we're protecting those budgets. Harry.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Harry Cole from The Sun. Overnight around the world, we saw a slew of headlines that would suggest that Britain is reeling and London is under siege, which is not an image that many commuters recognise this morning. What's your message to those that say Britain is cowering in the face of terror?
No, I think that what we have seen from the British people is that resolute British spirit and resolute British determination to get on with life and show that business is as usual. We saw that following the Manchester attack, and we saw it, and we're seeing it today in London. As you say, people here in the UK are going about their business because we will not allow the terrorists to defeat us. We will defeat them. George.
George Parker from the Financial Times. Prime Minister, I wondered if you'd like to say anything at all about the way that Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, has handled this crisis, and whether you have any views on the interventions of foreign world leaders in this issue so soon after an attack.
I think Sadiq is doing an excellent job, and Sadiq has. I've chaired a second Cobra meeting this morning. Sadiq Khan has been present at that. Was present at that meeting. He was present at the Cobra that I chaired yesterday. And we're working together. We're working with the Mayor of London and with City Hall to ensure, for example, that the transport network is able to get back up and running so that people can go about their business. Yes.
Prime Minister Carl Dinnan from ITV News. We have now had 3 terrorist attacks in 3 months. Whether it's an issue with policing or whether warnings have been missed, do you regard these attacks as a failure to prevent the attacks by government? And if so, do you worry about what that says about your record?
Well, over the past 3 months, we have had the 3 attacks. The police and the security services have also foiled 5 other attacks. What we have seen is an increase in tempo and a change in the terrorist threat, as I said, with terrorism breeding terrorism. And that's why it's absolutely right that we look at our response to that and we adjust our response, as we always do when we see the terror threat evolving and the means of the terrorists evolving. Yes.
Thank you. Matthew Holhouse, MLEX News Agency. Prime Minister, you and your government want to stay party to counter-terrorism tools after Brexit that are operated by the European Union, such as the Schengen Information System, CRIS, EAW. But as you know, those are currently subject to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. So do you accept that if you want to keep hold of those tools, you're going to have to compromise on your objective of exiting the European Court of Justice, or do you have an alternative plan that would allow you to do both?
The Schengen Information System, as you say, it's not just about terrorism, of course. It's about serious and organised criminals as well. It's about identification of people who are travelling across borders. And as part of the negotiations, we will be looking at that and at various other programmes and projects and arrangements of cooperation that we have currently as a member of the European Union, which would lapse when we leave the European Union, and to continue to have those in future. There'll be a number of areas in those negotiations where currently the European Court of Justice has jurisdiction, and as part of the negotiations, we will need to be looking at how we can ensure that there is appropriate oversight of the use of those. But I'm very clear the European Court of Justice and its jurisdiction in the UK is going to be ended. Yes, Rob.
Rob Hutton from Bloomberg. You just praised the work that Sadiq Khan has been doing as mayor. Donald Trump responded to the attack by mocking Sadiq Khan. Would a period of silence on his part now be welcome?
As I said, I'm very clear that Sadiq is doing a good job as Mayor of London. We're working with him, working together, and that's important. Government, central government, and the London Mayoralty and his officials working together to ensure that we are responding to the attack and looking, as I've said earlier, at the work that the police is doing to give the public extra protection and extra reassurance. We want people to go about their business. We are very clear that we will not allow the terrorists to harm our way of life or to harm our democracy.
Torkel Crichton, Daily Record. Prime Minister, why did you tell police officers they were crying wolf when they warned you about cuts?
Well, I think you're referring to a speech I gave to the Police Federation, where I was very clear with the Police Federation that they needed to reform. And guess what? The Police Federation took that message and they're reforming. Yes.
Prime Minister, Adam Bianco from Business Insider. You've said this election is about leadership. Your own leadership has been called into question this morning by your former colleague, Steve Hilton, Director of Strategy under David Cameron, who said that you were responsible for these recent attacks. What is your response to him?
I think, I have to say, I don't think I'm the only person in Westminster who has found themselves on the receiving end of a few comments from Steve Hilton. Yeah.
Alex Spence from BuzzFeed. What would Donald Trump have to say for you to criticise him publicly?
Oh, well, I've been very clear. I've been very happy to say that I think President Trump is wrong to have taken America out of the climate change agreement, out of the Paris Agreement. The United Kingdom stays in it, and we believe it's an important international agreement. So I'm not afraid to say when I think President Trump is getting things wrong. There was one further hand. Sadiq Khan is doing a good job. I've said that. I think Sadiq Khan is doing a good job. And it's wrong to say anything else. He is doing a good job.
Protecting the public became the main focus of campaigning today. There were confused messages from the Labour Party after Jeremy Corbyn appeared to row back on his suggestion that Theresa May should quit as Prime Minister for her role in cutting police numbers. Mr Corbyn said he was only reflecting the anger felt by many at the way Mrs May handled policing when she was Home Secretary.
Many people are very angry with her performance in the Home Office, with the loss of police numbers and undercutting of underfunding of emergency services, and so people are very angry. Quite honestly, there's an election on Thursday. That's the day to make a decision.
But you think she should resign?
No, I think we should vote on Thursday to decide who our MPs are and decide who our government is going to be.
But you said that you would back calls for her to resign. Are you backing away from that now?
I'm not backing away from anything. What I'm saying is an election on now is a choice before everybody. I'm articulating what is a deep anger amongst those people that have seen 20,000 police officers lose their jobs, seen firefighters lose their jobs, seeing ambulance crews unable to cope with the services they're under. I think as she as Home Secretary needs to think about what she did while she was Home Secretary.
So she shouldn't resign? I just want to be clear.
Let's be very clear. There is an election on. Everybody has a choice, and a lot of people are very angry and would have wanted her to resign were she still Home Secretary. The choice is going to be made on Thursday by the people of this country.
Well, our chief political correspondent John Craig is in our Westminster studio for us for more on this now. Sounds to me, John, as though politicians are politicking while the public just want to know what's happening to their police force.
Well, Mr Corbyn, of course, and others would argue that it is a legitimate issue in an election campaign, police numbers. Now, what has happened in recent days, of course, is that Theresa May's tenure at the Home Office has come under more scrutiny, and in particular the claim by the Labour Party, the Police Federation and others that while she was Home Secretary, police numbers were cut by 20,000. Now, that interview of Mr Corbyn we heard just there was actually his second of the day. His message was somewhat muddled. Earlier on, he was asked if he supported those calling for the PM to resign. He said, indeed, I would, because there's been calls made by a lot of very responsible people on this who are worried that when she was at the Home Office, provided over these cuts in police numbers. One of the calls was from the former Tory number 10 policy chief, Steve Hilton. Under Mr Cameron, he said that Theresa May was responsible for security failures of London Bridge, Manchester, Westminster Bridge, should be resigning, not seeking re-election. So here we have Prime Minister who wants to talk about Brexit, and now she is being challenged on her record on police numbers.
And just while we've got you, John, I want to ask you about this row that's been brewing between the London Mayor and the US President. It was an unseemly Twitter spat yesterday. How's it developed since then?
It's Mr Trump has stepped up his war of words against Sadiq Khan. Just to go back and explain what happened, the London Mayor tweeted that, talking about his initial tweet on the terrorist attack on Saturday night, said that people should not be alarmed by the presence of extra police on the streets. That prompted the president to tweet, at least 7 dead and 48 wounded in terror attack, and Mayor of London says there's no reason to be alarmed. Well, he's gone much further now. In another tweet, the president has talked about what he calls a pathetic excuse. This is what Mr Trump has said in another tweet. Pathetic excuse by London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who had to think fast on his no reason to be alarmed statement. Mainstream media, MSM, is working hard to sell it. Now, that was in response to an interview given by Mr Khan in which he talked about having more important things to do than respond to Mr. Trump's ill-informed tweet, as he put it. And this is what he had to say, with a rather subtle message about the invitation to Donald Trump to visit the UK later this year.
The capital city, we have other responsibilities, from major events, there's a big cricket match today, to state visits, some welcome, some less so. But the fact is we need to make sure that our police have the resources and support they need. And as the Mayor, my job is to make sure our city is safe, and I will do my best as the Mayor to be an advocate and a champion for our police to get the tools they need.
Well, it's perhaps worth pointing out that the current acting US ambassador in London, that's Lewis Lukens, he's backed Mr. Khan's strong leadership and distanced himself from the president. And, of course, when Theresa May was answering questions about policing numbers and so on, and cooperation with the mayor and him attending, Mr. Khan attending Cobra meetings and so on, she said he was doing an excellent job as London mayor, and a number of times she said what a good job Mr. Khan was doing as mayor.
OK, John, for now, thank you.